Her scream shattered the silence of the Upper East Side penthouse. A raw, guttural cry that echoed off marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Eleanor Ellie Whitaker, barely 18, stood trembling in her mother's study, clutching a love letter she'd written to her high school girlfriend, Maya. Senator Margaret Whitaker's icy stare pinned her daughter like a butterfly under glass. The letter now crumpled in her mother's manicured hand. "You will end this," Margaret hissed, her voice low but venomous. "Do you have any idea what this could do to our family? To my campaign?" Ellie's heart pounded, her vision blurring with tears. She'd always known her mother's ambition. Margaret Whitaker was New York's rising political star, a senator whose name was synonymous with power and tradition. But this was betrayal dressed in Chanel, a mother choosing votes over her daughter's truth. "I love her," Ellie whispered, her voice cracking but defiant. Margaret's face hardened. "Love? You're a child. You don't get to throw away our legacy for some phase." That night, Ellie was sent away, banished to a private boarding school in Vermont, far from Maya, far from the city that had been her home. The Whitaker family machine churned on, erasing her truth, burying her identity beneath layers of polished lies. For years, Ellie lived in the shadows of her mother's empire, her heart a locked box, her love for women a secret she learned to hide. But secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface. 10 years later, Ellie stood on the edge of a crowded Brooklyn rally, her breath catching as she watched her mother's face projected on a massive screen. Margaret Whitaker, now a titan in the Senate, was retiring, her seat up for grabs. The crowd roared, but Ellie's mind was elsewhere. On the girl she'd loved, the life she'd lost, and the fire that had been smoldering inside her all these years. She wasn't the scared teenager anymore. She was Eleanor Whitaker, 28, a lawyer who'd fought her way through Columbia Law School, a woman who'd learned to wield her pain like a weapon. And she was running for her mother's seat. Ellie's campaign office was a cramped loft in Williamsburg, a far cry from the gleaming Manhattan suites her mother's team occupied. The walls were plastered with posters reading "Whitaker for Change," a deliberate jab at her family's legacy of status quo. Her team, mostly volunteers, young and idealistic, buzzed around her, their energy infectious. But Ellie felt the weight of every step she took toward the public eye. Her campaign manager, Priya Khan, a sharp-witted 30-year-old with a knack for strategy, slid a tablet across the desk. "Your mother's team just dropped a new ad. It's all family values, tradition, the usual. They're framing you as the reckless daughter." Ellie's jaw tightened. "Let them. They don't know me anymore." Priya raised an eyebrow. "They know enough to hit hard. If they dig up your past, your real past, it could tank us." Ellie's past. The boarding school. The years of silence. The nights she'd spent writing unsent letters to Maya, who'd vanished from her life after that fateful night. Ellie had come out quietly in college, but she'd never spoken publicly about her identity. Her mother's team had made sure of that, burying any whisper of her being a lesbian under threats of disinheritance and public shame. "I'm not hiding anymore," Ellie said, her voice steady but her hands trembling. "If they want to fight, they'll get one." Priya nodded, her eyes softening. "Then we need a narrative, something real. People need to know you, not Margaret's version of you." Ellie leaned back, staring at the ceiling. How do you tell a story you've spent a decade suppressing? How do you stand in front of a city, a country, and say, "I'm a lesbian and I'm here to take back what was stolen from me"? That night, alone in her tiny apartment, Ellie pulled out an old shoebox from under her bed. Inside were relics of her past. A faded Polaroid of her and Maya at Coney Island, their arms around each other laughing. A dog-eared copy of The Color Purple, Maya's favorite book, and the letter, the one her mother had found. She traced the words she'd written at 17. "Maya, you're my home. No matter what they say, I'll always choose you." Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of the memory. A text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the Rusty Anchor. 9 p.m. We need to talk. M." Ellie's heart stopped. It couldn't be, could it? The Rusty Anchor was a dive bar in Greenpoint, all dim lights and sticky tables. Ellie arrived early, her nerves frayed, her leather jacket a shield against the autumn chill. She scanned the room, half expecting a ghost. And then she saw her. Maya Torres, now 28, stood at the bar, her long black hair cascading over a tailored blazer, her eyes as piercing as Ellie remembered. She was no longer the shy girl from high school. She was a woman, poised and unyielding, a journalist whose bylines had started appearing in major outlets. "Ellie," Maya said, her voice a mix of warmth and caution. Ellie's throat tightened. "Maya, I didn't think I'd ever see you again." Maya's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I saw your campaign announcement. Bold move, taking on your mother." Ellie laughed, a bitter edge to it. "Yeah, well, I'm done running." Maya's gaze softened, but there was a wall there, built by years of silence. "I read about you in college. You never reached out." "I tried," Ellie said, her voice breaking. "They took my phone, my laptop. By the time I got free, you were gone." Maya looked away, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "I waited, Ellie, for a long time." The air between them was heavy, charged with unspoken pain. Ellie wanted to reach out, to bridge the decade that had torn them apart, but the words caught in her throat. "I'm running as me," Ellie said finally. "No more hiding. But I need to know, are you with me? Or are you here to write the story that ends me?" Maya's eyes met hers, and for a moment, Ellie saw the girl she'd loved, the girl who'd made her feel whole. "I'm not here to hurt you," Maya said, "but I'm not here to save you either. You want my trust? Earn it." The first debate was a crucible. Ellie stood on a brightly lit stage in Albany, facing off against her mother's chosen successor, Richard Langley, a slick 50-year-old lawyer with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The moderator, a veteran journalist, fired questions about policy, healthcare, taxes, education, but Ellie knew the real fight was personal. Langley leaned into the microphone, his voice dripping with condescension. "Ms. Whitaker, you're young, untested. Why should voters trust you over someone with a proven record, someone who shares Senator Whitaker's values?" Ellie's pulse quickened. She could feel her mother's shadow looming, the weight of a decade spent silenced. But she straightened, her voice clear. "Because I know what it's like to fight for who you are. I know what it's like to be told your truth doesn't matter. New York deserves a senator who fights for everyone, not just the powerful." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others skeptical. Langley smirked. "Pretty words, but let's talk about character. Your family's legacy is one of integrity. Can you say the same?" It was a jab, a veiled reference to her past. Ellie's hands clenched, but she didn't flinch. "My character is in my actions. I'm here to serve, not to hide." After the debate, Priya pulled her aside. "You held your own, but Langley's team is sniffing around. They're digging into your time at boarding school. If they find out about Maya," Ellie's stomach twisted. "Let them dig. I'm not ashamed of who I am." But as she said it, doubt crept in. The world wasn't as forgiving as she wanted to believe, and her mother's machine was relentless. She needed Maya, not just as a memory, but as an ally. Ellie sat across from Maya at a quiet coffee shop in the East Village, the hum of the city muffled by the rain tapping against the windows. It had been a week since their reunion at the Rusty Anchor, and Ellie still felt the pull of Maya's presence. Like gravity, she couldn't escape. But Maya's guarded demeanor hadn't softened, and every glance between them carried the weight of 10 lost years. "I need to understand," Ellie said, her voice low, cradling her coffee mug for warmth. "Why now? Why reach out after all this time?" Maya's eyes flickered, a storm brewing behind them. "I'm covering your campaign for the New York Standard. When I saw your name, I couldn't just stay away." She paused, her fingers tightening around her own mug. "But don't think this is personal. I'm here for the story." Ellie's heart sank, but she kept her face steady. "And what's the story? The senator's daughter who dared to be herself? Or the scandal you think will sell papers?" Maya leaned forward, her voice sharp but not unkind. "The truth, Ellie. People deserve to know who you are, not just the polished version your mother's team fed them for years. But you have to decide how much you're willing to show." Ellie wanted to argue, to say she was ready to bear it all, but the fear lingered. Her mother's team had spies everywhere. Consultants, donors, even old family friends who'd turn on her in a heartbeat. If they uncovered her relationship with Maya, they'd twist it into something sordid, a weapon to destroy her campaign. "I'm not that girl anymore," Ellie said finally. "I'm not hiding, but I need to do this my way." Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then you'd better figure out what your way means, because your mother's people won't wait." As they parted ways, Ellie felt the ache of Maya's distance, a reminder of the life they could have had. But she also felt a spark, a resolve to reclaim her story, no matter the cost. Back at the campaign office, the mood was tense. Priya had uncovered a leaked memo from Langley's team, hinting at a personal revelation about Ellie that would shock voters. The words sent a chill down her spine. She could almost hear her mother's voice, orchestrating it all from her glass-walled office in Manhattan. "They're going to out me," Ellie said, pacing the loft, "before I can control the narrative." Priya crossed her arms, her expression grim. "Then we get ahead of it. You go public on your terms. A speech, an op-ed, something raw and real. People will rally behind authenticity." Ellie hesitated. Coming out publicly wasn't just about her. It would drag Maya into the spotlight too, and she wasn't sure Maya was ready for that, or if she ever would be. That evening, Ellie drove upstate to her family's estate in Westchester, a sprawling mansion that felt more like a museum than a home. Margaret Whitaker was waiting in the drawing room, her posture as rigid as ever, a glass of bourbon in her hand. "You're making a fool of yourself," Margaret said without preamble. "This campaign is a fantasy. You'll never win against Langley." Ellie stood her ground, her voice steady. "I'm not here for your approval, Mother. I'm here to tell you I'm done being your secret." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You think you can just waltz in and dismantle everything I've built? You're a liability, Eleanor. Always have been." The words stung, but Ellie refused to flinch. "You sent me away because I loved someone. You chose your image over me. I'm not that scared kid anymore." Margaret set her glass down, her smile cold. "Love doesn't win elections. Power does. And you'll never have it if you keep chasing ghosts." As Ellie drove back to the city, her mother's words echoed in her mind. But so did Maya's challenge. "Earn my trust." She knew what she had to do, even if it meant risking everything. The next morning, Ellie called a press conference in Union Square. The crowd was a mix of supporters, reporters, and curious onlookers, their phones raised to capture every word. Maya was there, standing near the back, her notebook in hand, her expression unreadable. Ellie stepped up to the podium, her heart racing but her resolve unshaken. "My name is Eleanor Whitaker," she began, her voice carrying over the murmurs. "And I'm running for Senate because I believe in a New York where everyone can live their truth without fear." She paused, taking a deep breath. 10 years ago, I was sent away by my family for being who I am, a lesbian. I was told my love was a scandal, a threat to their legacy. But I'm here today to say that love is never a scandal. It's a strength. And I'm running to fight for every person who's ever been told to hide who they are. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others whispering. But Ellie's eyes found Maya's. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw a flicker of pride in Maya's gaze. The press conference made headlines. Senator's daughter comes out in bold campaign move. Supporters flooded her campaign with donations, but the backlash was swift. Conservative outlets called her unstable, a radical. Langley's team released a statement questioning her moral fitness. And somewhere, Ellie knew, her mother was watching, her fury simmering. The fallout from Ellie's press conference was a storm she'd expected but couldn't fully brace for. Social media exploded with hashtags. Whitaker for Change trended alongside Whitaker Scandal. Support poured in from queer communities across New York, but so did vitriol. Anonymous emails flooded her inbox, calling her everything from brave to disgrace. At the campaign office, Priya was in crisis mode, fielding calls from reporters and donors. "You've got the youth vote locked," she said, tossing her phone onto the desk. But the older demographics? They're not sold. And Langley's team is leaning hard into the family values angle. Ellie rubbed her temples, exhaustion creeping in. What's the play? Priya hesitated. We need a human story. Something that makes you relatable, not just a symbol. People need to see you as a person, not a headline. Ellie's thoughts drifted to Maya. She hadn't spoken to her since the press conference, but Maya's article in the New York Standard had been fair, probing but respectful, painting Ellie as a fighter rather than a victim. It was a start, but Ellie needed more than Maya's pen. She needed her heart. That night, Ellie found herself outside Maya's apartment in Bed-Stuy, a modest brownstone with a fire escape that reminded her of their high school days. She texted, "Can we talk?" Maya appeared at the door minutes later, her expression wary but curious. "You don't give up, do you?" she said, stepping onto the stoop. "Not when it comes to you," Ellie replied, her voice soft but earnest. Maya sighed, crossing her arms. "You can't just waltz back into my life, Ellie. You broke my heart. You disappeared." "I didn't have a choice," Ellie said, her voice cracking. "They took everything from me, my phone, my freedom. By the time I could reach out, you were gone. I thought you'd moved on." Maya's eyes glistened, but she held her ground. "I didn't move on. I survived. There's a difference." Ellie stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here now, and I'm fighting for me, for us, for everyone who's ever been told they don't belong. Will you help me?" Maya looked away, her jaw tight. After a long silence, she said, "I'll think about it, but don't expect me to make this easy." The campaign gained momentum, fueled by Ellie's authenticity. She spoke at community centers, pride events, and small-town diners, sharing her story with a rawness that resonated. But every step forward came with a cost. Her mother's team escalated their attacks, leaking old photos of Ellie at boarding school, spinning them as evidence of a troubled youth. One evening, as Ellie prepared for a town hall in Rochester, Priya burst into the green room, her face pale. "They've got something big. A source close to your family is talking to the Post. They're saying you were involved with a teacher at that boarding school." Ellie's blood ran cold. It was a lie, a vicious fabrication, but the kind that could stick. "That's not true," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "I was a kid sent away to be fixed. There was no teacher." "I know," Priya said, her tone urgent. "But we need to shut this down fast. A statement, a counter-narrative, something." Ellie's mind raced. She couldn't let her mother's machine rewrite her past again. She needed an ally, someone who could corroborate her truth. Someone like Maya. She called Maya that night, her voice urgent. "They're lying about me, Maya. They're saying I was involved with a teacher in Vermont. I need you to help me set the record straight." Maya was silent for a moment, then said, "Send me everything you have. I'll look into it." Over the next few days, Maya dug into the story, using her contacts to trace the source of the leak. It led back to one of Margaret's longtime aides, a man known for playing dirty. Maya's article, published the following week, exposed the lie, detailing how Ellie had been sent to a conversion therapy program disguised as a boarding school. The piece was a bombshell, shifting public sympathy toward Ellie and painting her mother's campaign as ruthless. But the victory came at a cost. Maya's article mentioned their past relationship, not by name but enough to spark speculation. Ellie's phone lit up with messages from reporters, demanding details. She felt exposed, vulnerable in a way she hadn't anticipated. The article changed everything. Ellie's campaign surged in the polls, her story resonating with voters who saw her as a symbol of resilience. But the personal toll was heavy. Reporters hounded her, asking invasive questions about her relationship with Maya. Social media buzzed with speculation, some supportive, others cruel. Ellie felt like she was living under a microscope, her love for Maya dissected by strangers. She met Maya at a quiet diner in Harlem, away from the city's prying eyes. Maya looked tired, her usual poise fraying at the edges. "I didn't mean for it to blow up like this," Maya said, stirring her coffee. "I thought the article would help." "It did," Ellie said, her voice soft. You told the truth. That's what matters. Maya shook her head. It's not just about the truth. It's about what it's doing to you, to us. Ellie reached across the table, her hand hovering near Maya's. There's an us. Maya's eyes met hers, a mix of longing and frustration. There could have been. But you're in the middle of a war, Ellie. And I'm not sure I can be collateral damage. The words hit like a punch. Ellie pulled her hand back, her chest tight. I'm not asking you to fight my battles. I need you to believe in me. Maya's expression softened, but she didn't respond. As they left the diner, Ellie felt the distance between them widen, a chasm she wasn't sure she could bridge. With the election 6 weeks away, Ellie threw herself into the campaign, speaking at rallies across the state. Her message was clear: authenticity over ambition, inclusion over exclusion. But Langley's team wasn't done. They released a new ad, featuring Margaret Whittaker herself, calling Ellie unstable and unfit to lead. The ad stung, but it also galvanized Ellie's supporters. At a rally in Syracuse, a young woman approached her, tears in her eyes. I came out to my parents because of you, she said. Thank you for being brave. Ellie hugged her, her own eyes misting. Moments like these reminded her why she was fighting, not just for herself, but for every person who'd ever felt erased. That night, Maya called. I'm in, she said, her voice firm. I'm writing a follow-up piece, but I need your story, all of it. The boarding school, your mother, us. Are you ready for that? Ellie's heart raced. Yes, but only if you're ready too. Maya laughed softly, a sound Ellie hadn't heard in years. I'm terrified, but I'm with you. Maya's follow-up article was a love letter to resilience, weaving Ellie's story with her own. It detailed their high school romance, the pain of their separation, and Ellie's journey to reclaim her identity. Published in the New York Standard, it went viral, shared thousands of times with hashtags like Ellie for Senate and Love is Not a Scandal. The response was overwhelming. Supporters flooded Ellie's campaign with donations, volunteers, and messages of solidarity. But the backlash grew too, with conservative pundits accusing her of exploiting her identity for votes. Ellie ignored the noise, focusing on the people who showed up at her rallies. Queer kids, single moms, working-class families who saw her as one of their own. One evening, as Ellie prepared for a debate in Buffalo, Priya handed her a letter. It was from her mother, handwritten, a rarity in their digital world. Eleanor, you've made your point. Step back now before you destroy everything. Margaret. Ellie crumpled the letter, her resolve hardening. She doesn't get to control me anymore, she told Priya. At the debate, Ellie faced Langley head-on, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. My mother built a legacy on power. I'm building one on truth. New York deserves a senator who fights for its heart, not its headlines. The crowd roared, and even Langley looked rattled. Ellie felt a shift, a tide turning in her favor. After the debate, Ellie and Maya met at a rooftop bar in Manhattan, the city skyline glittering below. For the first time in weeks, they weren't campaigning or strategizing, just talking. I read your article, Ellie said, her voice soft. You didn't have to include yourself. That was brave. Maya smiled, a real smile this time. I wanted to. You're not the only one fighting for something, Ellie. They talked for hours, unraveling the years apart, the pain and the growth. Ellie felt the spark of their old connection, fragile but alive. When Maya reached for her hand, Ellie didn't pull away. I don't know what happens next, Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. But I want to find out. Ellie squeezed her hand, her heart full. Me too. With 3 weeks until the election, Ellie's campaign was a whirlwind. She crisscrossed the state, from Long Island to the Adirondacks, meeting voters and sharing her vision. Maya joined her for some events, her presence a quiet strength. Their relationship wasn't public, but it wasn't a secret either, just a private truth they were learning to navigate. Langley's campaign grew desperate, their attacks more personal. At a rally in Queens, a heckler shouted, "You're no Whittaker." Ellie smiled, unfazed. I'm a different kind of Whitaker, one who fights for you. The crowd cheered, and Ellie felt the momentum building. But behind the scenes, her mother's team was planning a final blow. Priya got wind of it, a smear campaign alleging Ellie had fabricated her conversion therapy story for sympathy. "We need proof," Priya said, her voice urgent. "Documents, witnesses, something to back you up." Ellie hesitated. The boarding school had been a dark chapter, one she tried to bury. But she knew Priya was right. She reached out to an old teacher, Ms. Carter, who'd been kind to her during those lonely years. Ms. Carter agreed to provide a sworn statement, confirming the school's true nature. The statement was a game-changer, published alongside Maya's reporting. It silenced the skeptics and shifted the narrative back to Ellie's strength. The night before the election, Ellie received an unexpected call from her mother. "Meet me at the house," Margaret said, her voice clipped. Ellie arrived at the Westchester estate, her stomach in knots. Margaret was alone. No aides or cameras, just a mother and daughter in a room heavy with history. "I underestimated you," Margaret said, her tone grudging. "But this isn't about you. It's about our family's legacy." Ellie shook her head. "Your legacy erased me. I'm building my own." For the first time, Margaret looked uncertain. "You could lose everything, Eleanor. Is it worth it?" Ellie met her mother's gaze, unflinching. "Yes, because I'm finally free." Election night was a blur of lights, cameras, and nervous energy. Ellie's campaign headquarters buzzed with volunteers, their faces a mix of hope and exhaustion. Maya was there, her notebook tucked away, her presence a quiet anchor. As the results rolled in, Ellie's lead was narrow but steady. District by district, she watched the numbers climb, her heart pounding with every update. Priya paced, muttering statistics, while Maya squeezed Ellie's hand under the table. At midnight, the call came. Ellie had won. The room erupted in cheers, confetti raining down as supporters chanted her name. Ellie took the stage, her voice trembling but strong. "Tonight, New York chose truth over fear," she said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "This isn't just my victory, it's ours. For every person who's ever been told to hide, this is for you." Maya's smile from the crowd was brighter than the stage lights. Ellie felt a weight lift, a decade of pain dissolving in the roar of the crowd. Chapter 15. A New Beginning. In the weeks after the election, Ellie settled into her role as senator-elect, her days filled with meetings and planning. But her nights belonged to Maya. They rebuilt their connection slowly, piece by piece, learning each other's new edges and old wounds. One evening, as they walked through Central Park, Maya stopped, her eyes bright. "I'm proud of you," she said, "but I'm also scared. This life, it's not easy." Ellie took her hand, her voice steady. "I know, but we'll face it together." Maya nodded, her smile soft. Together. Ellie's first weeks as senator-elect were a whirlwind of press interviews, policy briefings, and public appearances. She was no longer just Eleanor Whitaker. She was a symbol, a voice for those who'd been silenced. But the spotlight came with pressure. Every move was scrutinized, every word dissected. Maya, now a senior reporter at the New York Standard, became her confidant, helping her navigate the media storm. Their relationship deepened, but they kept it private, a sanctuary from the chaos of public life. One afternoon, Ellie received an invitation to a gala hosted by a major LGBTQ+ advocacy group. It was her first major public appearance as senator-elect, and she asked Maya to come as her date. "Are you sure?" Maya asked, her voice hesitant. "This will make us official. No going back." Ellie smiled, her heart steady. "I've spent too long hiding. I want the world to know I'm with you." At the gala, they walked in hand, cameras flashing. The crowd cheered, and for the first time, Ellie felt truly free. Not just as a senator, but as herself. Chapter 17. Healing Old Wounds. Ellie's relationship with her mother remained strained, but a small crack appeared when Margaret sent a congratulatory note. Formal, but a gesture nonetheless. Ellie didn't respond, but she kept the note, a reminder of the complexity of family. She and Maya spent Christmas in Brooklyn, cooking dinner in Maya's tiny apartment, laughing over burnt potatoes and old memories. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. As Ellie prepared to take office, she focused on her platform: equality, healthcare reform, and economic justice. She hired a diverse team, including Priya as her chief of staff, and began drafting legislation to protect queer youth from conversion therapy. Maya's career soared, her reporting earning national attention. She and Ellie balanced their demanding schedules, stealing moments together whenever they could. Their love was a quiet strength, a foundation for the challenges ahead. One evening, Ellie stood on her apartment balcony, looking out at the city she'd sworn to serve. Maya joined her, wrapping an arm around her waist. "You did it," Maya said. "You changed everything." Ellie shook her head. "We did it. Together." Ellie's first speech on the Senate floor was a call to action, urging her colleagues to fight for inclusion and justice. She spoke of her own journey, her voice steady but emotional, and the chamber fell silent, moved by her authenticity. Back in New York, she and Maya hosted a community event in Brooklyn, celebrating with the people who'd supported her. The crowd was diverse, young and old, queer and straight, united by a shared belief in a better future. A year into her term, Ellie stood at a podium in Albany, announcing a new bill to ban conversion therapy nationwide. The room was packed with activists, survivors, and families, their faces a testament to the fight they'd shared. Maya sat in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. "This bill isn't just policy," Ellie said, her voice ringing with conviction. "It's a promise to every young person who's ever been told their love is wrong, that they are enough, just as they are." The bill passed, a landmark victory that cemented Ellie's legacy. She and Maya celebrated quietly, walking hand in hand through the city they both loved. Years later, Ellie would look back on her journey, not just as a senator, but as a woman who'd fought to reclaim her truth. She'd faced her mother's empire, her own fears, and a world that wasn't always kind. But she'd also found love, strength, and a purpose bigger than herself. As she and Maya stood on a Brooklyn rooftop, watching the sunset paint the skyline gold, Ellie knew she'd made the right choice. She'd chosen love, not just for Maya, but for herself, for her community, for a future where no one had to hide. And that was a legacy worth fighting for.